Alrighty, welcome back to another Supercoach video with me, JD. You are joining me for the first of the 2022 videos. Yes, in 2021. I hope you guys have all been keeping well during more COVID craziness. I thought we were through the worst of it, but here we are, keep chugging along. So, yeah, hope next year's a little bit different, and I hope you guys are all staying well. Now, before we get stuck into this, I am going to go through each of the players through the trade and free agency period, as you can probably guess from the tier list in front of me. And I'm going to rank them based on whether I think their movement is relevant or irrelevant to Supercoach. So I'll just read a little bit of a disclaimer that this judgment that I'm making is not on whether or not it was a good or bad deal for a club, or whether the player is good or bad. It is purely my initial take on whether or not this trade makes a player relevant for Supercoach in 2022 or other players around them. Many assumptions have been made around the position of their new team, the positional eligibility in Supercoach, and their price, which is estimated using the 5,400 magic number. So expect these opinions to change, especially as preseason reports come out. Thanks, and let's get stuck in. All right, now, one of the things I will tell you straight off the bat is there are a lot of faces that I struggle to remember on a normal day, and when you change their club colors, it makes it so much worse. So I'm going to try and do my best for the first time. And we're going to work our way up from, I guess, irrelevant through to relevant. But if I stuff some of these up, please forgive me. All right. So first one is Darcy Forte, who has gone to Geelong. And I think he is the only person that didn't actually get a club render in their new jersey or a photo in the new jersey, the poor guy. So the 28-year-old arrives at the Lions after having played 8 senior games over 3 years with Geelong. He was recruited as a mature age player anyway in the 2018 draft, which is why he is already 28. It's surprisingly old. I expected him to be younger. Definitely seems to be a backup or depth option for Brisbane. Their quotes are around, we think he's a legitimate ruckman, but we are also confident he can help us out up forward and add flexibility to our squad. So yeah, everything reads like he's going to be a backup option. He hasn't played since 2020, where he averaged 81 over 5 games. So a little unsure on what his price would be, but I expect he'll be a pure ruck. The reality is that he would need a massive discount and the starting role to be relevant at a R2 position. So he is just not going to be relevant for next year. Very hard to see that being likely. The next one in the ruck merry-go-round, as they like to call it, is Jonathan Segler, so the ex-Hawk. He'll be 31 next year, and he could actually take over Reece Stanley as the number 1 ruck at Geelong. However, he averaged 90 this year already, and so at 486k, he doesn't really present any value when compared to other options in the ruck line, so it is very hard to see him being relevant in 2022 for Supercoach. Next ruck up in the ruck roulette is Max Lynch. So likely to be very cheap, given that he averaged just 54.5 over 2 games this year for Collingwood. But I expect this to be a long-term play for the Hawks. So really as a replacement once McAvoy finishes up, and Reeves being the kind of breakout who appears to be the number 1 option this year. I guess there's a world where he overtakes him in the preseason, but I think that's highly unlikely. So I expect to see him in and out of this year, get a few games, but then once McAvoy retires, start to cement himself. If he was, for whatever reason, the number 1 ruck at Hawks at a 54.5 average with potentially a discount, then he is interesting. I just don't think that's a likely outcome, so I've got him down as irrelevant. I guess you could put him in deep watch list if you really wanted to. So Peter Laddams, 410k. Once again, he seems to be someone that was recruited as a long-term ruck replacement for the Swans. So eventually replacing Hickey, who did have a couple of injury hiccups this year, but was largely durable. So I believe his role next year will still primarily be forward with some ruck time. But he does carry a 410k price tag already and really doesn't present any value either as a forward keeper or as a ruck value play. So he's just someone that won't be relevant. Chol, Mabio Chol, where are you? He had the best picture with the thumbs up. We'd love to see that. So yeah, up to the Gold Coast Suns on a 4-year deal, which that's a serious deal. You don't just give around 4-year deals willy-nilly, I wouldn't have thought. So not knowing a ton about the Gold Coast Suns, I would imagine that he's still going to be playing primarily forward next year as a ruck support to Witts, with maybe the long-term vision that he actually takes over that ruck role. But given he's going to be playing key position forward, He's just not going to be relevant, even though he's priced at a cheaper 67.5 average, I think, compared to some of these other options. But yeah, just not going to be relevant, unfortunately, but should still be good to watch. So looking forward to that. Luke Dunstan, so he's just depth at Melbourne. You don't expect him to get a lot of playing time, and when you do, it's probably likely he's getting played out of position rather than midfield. So I think it's going to be a hard pass. O'Brien for the Dogs. So he will come in as the Josh Bruce replacement, spending time as a key position forward. He'd be lucky to average 70. I mean, I think Bruce averaged something like 65, 66 this year. He's not a better player than Bruce. I don't think the Dog system's going to change. So even if he's best 22 for the whole year and tops out at his best average, it's not going to be more than 75. It's just a hard no. Lewis Young to Carlton. He looks really unsure on this photo, poor old Lewis. I think that's his name. It's got to be, right? Oh, that'll be bad if I butchered it. I'm sure I butchered someone else's name. Oh, yikes. Look, first video and we're already doing it. That's all right. Setting up for next year. Well, so he's expected to be playing down back and he's priced at 61 average, but I mean, he's just not going to be that rebounding or intercepting defender that really scores well. So it's just not really an option. Tarrant, who has landed at the Tigers in the twilight of his career. So he actually is like somewhat interesting in the sense that he's over 20 points per game cheaper than his previous best season. I guess the worries are here that the Tigers haven't produced a high-scoring interceptor key defender since Rance, as far as I'm aware. And at 33-year-old, in a new club, having two of his last seasons being interrupted with injuries, he just doesn't seem like he's going to be the answer to that at all. Then we've got CCJ. So once again, he seems to be unlike it's a common theme with actually a lot of the ruck movements this year that we've seen. So he's behind an aging existing ruck, in this case Goldstein, who's probably got 1 or 2 years left at tops at AFL level. So even if he's a ruck forward eligible in Supercoach, his actual game role seems like it's going to be likely to be that forward with some ruck time. He's priced at a 66 average, which is okay, but generally we're looking for 20 to 25 points per game improvement, and I just can't really see CCJ getting that much extra value in his price in a North team that is likely to be in the bottom 4 to 6 still. And then finally, Jeremy Finlayson to Port Adelaide. I mean, it's a key forward. It's just not relevant. I think that is everyone in this first tier. We'll find out. Now, for this irrelevant tier, I mean, they're all irrelevant, so I haven't really ranked them in terms of like who is the least irrelevant, because it doesn't really make sense, and who's the most irrelevant. But we did talk about like some that could potentially move up to a watch list position based on what happens. But yeah, these ones, I put them out of your mind. So deep in the watch list, I have 2, and I think one of those is Will Brody. So he should be quite cheap priced at something like 278k with a 51.5 average. His best year in 2018, he averaged 80 over 8 games, playing primarily in the inside mid, averaging 22 touches. However, we should be getting better cheap options than this in our midfields, or either as midfielders or with like DPP. And to be honest, it's unlikely he breaks into the midfield rotation in Freo, I believe, because while Chera has left, and we will talk about him obviously later, you do have Sarong and Brayshaw still developing, and you have Fife coming back in, and Brody's been in the system for a while now and still hasn't been able to break in at Gold Coast, which, I just can't see it happening. I mean, you had like Jared Lyons move, and he became one of the top midfields for the Brisbane Lions, and still is. So you could see something like that. Maybe Brody just does need that opportunity in a new environment. And that is why he does make it on the deep watch list, because he's priced well. And if he can break into that midfield in the preseason, he's definitely someone that becomes a consideration quickly. I just place it quite low on the range of outcomes. Kind of someone I expect to be a little bit fringing in and out of the side throughout the year. And the other one is Lipinski. And so this will be quite controversial because George tweeted today that these two were his two most relevant, and I have 6 players ahead. But I think how he rated them might be a little bit different, which could explain it. So Lipinski to the Pies. So having managed just 56 games over 5 years at the Dogs, he's been largely starved of opportunity in what is a very talented Dogs side. So he could surprise to the upside here if the role is right at Collingwood. So priced at an average of 68.1, which should roughly be 356k. It's easy to see him being able to get back to an average of 80 plus. But you'd really be hoping for a 90 plus average at that price point. And traditionally, that's quite difficult for half forward flankers. So you would need to see him spending more time in a better Supercoach role, such as in the wings or more in the midfield, for you to really be interested. So that's one of those ones where it's like, this could surprise the upside and his price is okay, but we need to wait for the preseason to see what role he's playing, how cemented he is in that best 22 before you would take a punt on someone like Lipinski. I'm sure George just had him much higher because he's ex-Dog, an ex-Dog midfielder, but who knows? And I think I'd probably have Will Brody as the more relevant of the two, so I'd probably order them like that. Let's go for the watch list. So George Hewitt I have here. At 394k, he is a somewhat interesting or relevant option. I guess the tricky thing for the Swans, for Hewitt at the Swans this year is even though he had a pretty big breakout year, especially in the back half, in any given week you could see him playing in the guts, you could see him tagging, or you could see him playing across half back. He really was a versatile, big-bodied defensive mid. And I guess the tricky thing here is assuming where he's going to play in Carlton's structure. It doesn't seem like he would be playing a midfield role with the acquisition of Chera and having Walsh and Cripps, for example. But and you still got like Curnow and stuff. They've got Setterfield that they want to put more mid-time into. So they've got a lot of options there, I guess, at Carlton. But what could be interesting is if he does play that halfback role, especially with Doherty missing, or presuming to miss for a lot of next year. He's still likely to be competing with Newman and probably Williams to a lesser extent for that halfback role, but it is possible that he actually gets up to a 90 plus average. He did manage a 90, I think, after the bye, and he's priced. He managed over an average of over 90 at the Swans after the bye, playing that more halfback role, and he is priced at 73. So there isn't a ton of value there, but he is someone that could surprise. Like maybe he's actually a deep watch list guy. I feel like him and Will Brody were kind of like right on the border, and you could probably put them together if you really wanted to. Next one I'll chuck in here is SPS Petrovsky-Seton at 341k, which is a little bit cheaper than Hewitt. So he is interesting because he's likely to be forward eligible next year. And the talks that we've got so far is that he's looking to break into the West Coast midfield. Now, he was trying to do that at Carlton as well and did so unsuccessfully. Maybe you could argue that the Blues midfield's a little bit stronger, so it might be easier at West Coast. But, West Coast do have players like Yo and Shuey that'll hopefully be fit and taking up those midfield roles. So whether there's really that much opportunity for someone like SPS, a little bit of an unknown. I think this is one of those wait and sees. Where does he play in the preseason? And is he starting to improve on some of, I guess, the big knocks on him to date, which has been around fitness? I think both overall fitness, but also the ability to repeat efforts. He is an explosive player, but you just didn't see enough times in a game where he was actually producing those explosive moments. So those are the types of things we'll be looking for in the preseason to see if SPS could be a mid-price forward option at 340k. And then finally, someone that I guess wasn't a great pick this year, but I had my team in Jordan Clark. So he should be priced at 334k roughly. And yeah, he was a little bit of a tease this year. We expected this could be the big breakout year, but averaged just 62 over 8 games. The positional eligibility in Supercoach could be interesting. I could see him being given forward defense or mid-forward eligibility. Maybe that's already been leaked and I'm kind of well off the mark here. But instead of playing the natural role that he was kind of recruited and initially like he was earmarked for as a defender midfielder, or like a rebounding defender, he ended up playing a lot of that half forward flank role, which is a bit of a dead role for Supercoach, and fell out of favour with the Cats for most of the year, which hence explains the trade. A lot was talked about Scarlett, the defensive coach, being the main reason, and then clashing heads. But whatever it is, I guess the tricky thing is going to be forecasting what his role at Freo is going to be, because while it's easy to say like, yeah, he'll just go into that that halfback kind of defensive rebounding role, Freo actually have a lot of talent in that space already. So younger talent, they have both Young and Chapman, who are good defenders with good kicks out of defense as well. And I would actually say Clark's kicking isn't up to, I wouldn't say it's well below average. It's probably like just on par, but they've got better kicks. So both in Young and Chapman, but also then Ryan and Wilson, who will be taking the kickouts. So if he does play that halfback or rebounding role, does that push Young or Chapman out? Maybe. There has been some talk that they are going to push for mid-time. So maybe Young goes up in the midfield and Clark takes his position down back. Maybe something like that could happen. Or we could see Clark play up on a wing, which may be less interesting. And I guess the half-forward role is like not interesting at all. So yeah, like Jordan Clark has the talent. We've seen glimpses of it, but we really need to see the role and how it fits in with Freo for him to be relevant in 2022. Oh, I'm not used to talking for this long. My throat's already gone. So the top 3 relevant people from this trade period, and look, one is definitely going to surprise you. So we'll get to him. It's not just because I'm a Bombers fan, I promise. So Adam Chera at 484k. Him leaving isn't so much like he himself isn't relevant. And I guess this is a little bit of a theme for all of the most relevant people in the trade period this year. So him leaving frees up time in the Fremantle engine room for Brayshaw, Sarong, and Fife's return. And I think that is the interesting thing, because Spray was actually 4.5 points better with Chera in the side, while Sarong, who was the main one that benefited in his absence, averaging 8 points higher without Chera in the side. So this is really interesting. How does Chera's leaving affect Brayshaw? How does it affect Sarong? Those are the players that actually kind of make him somewhat relevant. On the Carlton side, we could kind of look at the same things here, with him being more midfield support for Walsh and Cripps, probably more than someone like Williams offered this year. I actually wonder how it does impact Williams, because Williams was obviously someone that was looking to play midfield. It's part of the reason why he joined Carlton in the first place, but really did not do well this year, and his fitness kind of was a big problem. So does he become just a 4th rotational mid, then playing more time half back, where he's traditionally scored better? It could be interesting depending on I don't know. Williams is just going to be mid only though, so still not going to be relevant, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so I don't think this impacts Walsh, for example. It might help Cripps, and I don't think it's really going to help Chera score. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that Carlton midfield. So he himself, I don't think is particularly relevant, but I do think it is interesting how he affects both Chera, Brayshaw, and Fife. Sorry, not Chera, Brayshaw, and Fife. Sarong, Brayshaw, and Fife, as well as how it impacts Walsh, Cripps, and Williams. So be checking the structures of both those midfields during the preseason. Second up is Kelly, who joined Essendon. Now, this one seems really weird. Why would Kelly be relevant to Supercoach? Kelly comes as one of the top few small, medium lockdown defenders over the past few years, which is not a Supercoach role, as we all know. While at the same time, his offensive rebounding capabilities are non-existent, to put it nicely. But his recruitment is actually really exciting for Jordan Ridley, who is likely to be no longer accountable, or basically forced into accountable roles on players like Toby Green, Papley, Elliott, Ryan. Who was the other one I forgot? Arts, I think he played, or Bolton, he played at Tigers. So there are a handful of games this year where Ridley was forced to play these lockdown roles on Small and medium defenders, he should be freed up from those roles. They should be given to Kelly exclusively now. And the beauty about this is looking at Ridley's games when you remove the concussion, as well as a few of those one-on-one matchups, those more accountable matchups on small and mediums I talked about. His average went from something like 98 to 112, and all of a sudden he looks like great value for next year. So we are, of course, going to be checking to make sure that Kelly is best 22. He is taking those accountable roles, but this looks quite promising to free up Ridley as a very good Supercoach option in 2022 once again. And then finally, I have Jordan Dawson, who should be priced at roughly 545,000 going to the Crows. So he averaged 101 in 2021, breaking out from the 85, 86 kind of mark he was the prior 2 years. Big shift in his position in the final year at the Swans, especially post-bye, as he moved more up to a wing role. Understanding what his position is at the Crows is going to be huge in determining his value, assuming he's still defender eligible. If he's just a midfielder, he's probably not going to be relevant in any way whatsoever. But he did average 114 post-bye. Now, what was interesting about this is that 114 post-bye was up the ground, playing on the wing without kickouts. In fact, only 3 out of the 9 games had any kickouts whatsoever, and I think the highest was 40%. It was like 11%, 33%, 40%. So it was like 1, 2, or 3 kicks, I'm guessing, based on the percentages, something like that. So I guess like questions for Dawson around, can the Crows support his type of scoring opposite someone like Seedsman, who scores pretty well himself? I'm not really sure he plays the rebounding role, given that they have Millera coming back. Oh, Millera, sorry. Millera, they've still got Brody Smith and someone else I'm missing as well, I'm pretty sure. So question marks around how all these pieces fit together. But the reason why he is the most relevant in my mind is because him leaving means that he's definitely not taking any of Jake Lloyd's kickouts. So let me see if I can quickly find the research I've done here. Sorry, I was meant to have it in front of me. So in games where Lloyd had more than 70% of the kickouts, he averaged 120. In games where he averaged less than 70% of the kickouts, he had a 104 average. In games where he had 60% or more of kickouts, he averaged 111. In games with 60% or less, he averaged 105. So the reason why I bring this up is because for the first half of the year, basically up into the buys, Jordan Dawson was taking a lot of kickouts from Lloyd, a lot of kickouts. So you had a lot of games for Lloyd where he was dipping, 50%, 30%. I think he even had one game like 29%, which was a season low by a fair bit. So you have this like quite interesting opportunity for Lloyd where he averaged like 107, but now he should be getting more kickouts as long as someone like Braden Campbell doesn't pop up and start taking them, or Cunningham doesn't start taking more. So as long as that kind of comes to fruition, it makes Jake Lloyd once again a big lock for next year. Dawson himself could still be interesting. Once again, he averaged 114 post-buy, and if you buy into how a player finishes the year is one of the most important things to determining their performance next year, then Dawson does provide upside. But whether or not he can kind of achieve the same level of Supercoach scoring on a wing at Crows, who a worse side than the Swans were this year, presumably next year, like I guess they could shoot up, but it's hard to see. That kind of wraps up the list. So for my most relevant players are Dawson, Kelly, and Chera, but mainly because Dawson enables Lloyd, Kelly enables Ridley, and Chera could enable any of the Freo or cut and build, but it's just really hard to determine which ones. On the watch list, we kind of have, in fact, on both the watch list and the deep watch list, we have predominantly players that are underpriced because they haven't had opportunity. So we're really watching for what their roles are in the preseason and whether they can work on some of the flaws in their games to cement best 22 spots and really be able to be a good cash cow for us. I think the exception is Hewitt, who's probably the most proven of the 5. And it will come down more to role and how that fits within the Carlton structure and team. And then we have a long host of relevance. These are mainly rucks, key position forwards, and a couple of depth players. But yeah, hopefully this has been useful. It's been insightful. It's been a relatively slow trade period this year, which is a bit of a shame. And Trade Radio didn't help it whatsoever. It dragged it out for what seemed like an eternity. But if you do have any questions, any thoughts, anything I've missed, please hit me up below. Otherwise, I am looking for ideas and suggestions on what preseason content could look like between now and 2022. So yeah, hit me up with those as well, and I will see you guys in the next one.